Most creative agencies don't fall apart because they're creative work. They fall apart because their delivery system can't handle the growth. The agencies that grow year after year, they don't get lucky. They build infrastructure, a delivery system that keeps quality high, timelines more predictable throughout the project, the team aligned, even throughout the busy season. In this video, I'll show you exactly how high growth agencies structure their delivery pipeline so that they can grow without chaos, without the burnout, and without you, the founder, needing to be involved in every single decision. This video also happens to be part 2 of our Systemize Your Agency series. And if you've already watched the SOP video, this will layer perfectly on top. Let's go ahead and jump in. So let's first start with what infrastructure means within a creative agency. And infrastructure are a couple of things, but it's the layers, the workflow of how things go from initial signed SOW to delivery of the actual work to the client. So the SOPs that are involved, the way that project management functions, the way that we communicate, the communication standards, the way that we manage the client expectations. It's all of those little pieces, those small processes, systems that actually work in tandem with each other that create for not only an incredibly great client experience, but create for a high fidelity of work, maintain quality, and make sure that we're having the impact to the client. And so it's individual small little process systems that work in tandem with each other or alongside each other. This one ends, this one begins, and how they actually work together. And infrastructure matters more than just the talent alone. Because the reality is that you can have an incredible talent, but without the information, they're not going to do excellent work because they're being guided in the wrong direction. You can have the best in class airplane, but if it's headed in the wrong direction, it is going to arrive at the wrong location, which is the same is true for your agency. If you're hiring incredibly senior designers, team members, but if the project is launched incorrectly, they're going to end up at the wrong deliverable. And so it's incredibly vital that you have the right systems in place that provide the right information, and then ultimately allowing for the feedback loop. Because the reality is no project is going to go perfectly. As much as I'd like them to, projects just don't go perfectly. There's always little nuances, little learning lessons that can allow for projects in the future to be turned better, improve upon the things, allow for us to take things that we learned and did incredibly well in this project and then make them more repeatable in future. But that feedback loop is vital. So one little tidbit there. So now let's start to talk about what that actual delivery pipeline goes from initial SOW signature to final delivery of the work. And if you're retainer based, it's that reoccurring timeline, whether that's quarterly, whether that's monthly, and how it is that you're going about delivering your services. But SOW signature to delivery of work, whether it's project or retainer. And so I want to get through each component and have an understanding of how these actually work. So you've got SOW signature, you have project launch, you have brief that's involved in that project launch, then you go into initial big idea of the production, then you go into, and if you have multiple design reviews, you just reiterate on this and do that cycle again. But big idea, design, review, final design, client, revision, final delivery, right? And then make sure that you have an understanding of where you have the SOPs that attach to it. So as an example, how do you go about launching an internal project? So how do we go about creating the agenda? What information is included? Who's involved in that meeting? What information is shared before the meeting? So that's an SOP. One specific SOP of how we go about internal project launch. Does that include the brief? It should. Does that include the brief? Does that include those pieces of information? And then client project launch. What information are we sharing in advance? What information are we collecting for them in advance? All those sort of little pieces of what the agenda actually looks like, a template ideally that goes along with that agenda. And then how do we go about communicating with clients? How frequently are you checking in with them? Because as we all know, client feedback can really throw things off the deep end. I want to hit something really starkly here that is discernibly one of the biggest differences that I see in creative deliverables. And so if you have a creative component to the work that you're delivering within your agency, be that brand, be that a product design, be that web, one of the biggest distinctions seeing a agency that is able to execute the work on time budgets, on timeline, and being able to be profitable is how well they are at onboarding the team or the briefing system that they're utilizing. Often can be 80 to even 90% of revisions or overage in work being true here. Looking through all of the clients that I've worked with that I have the data for in the first place anyways, but the clients that have greater amounts of strategy, more intentional briefs at the beginning of the project allow for less revisions, allow for higher client lifetime value because they're able to sell again because the client has a better experience, and the projects are on budget. And so that one source of truth, that big idea that's launched, that creative brief, account brief, project brief, whatever you want to call it, is incredibly vital. So and as examples, things that you want to include in each different brief changes depending on your deliverables, but what is the ICP of the client as an example? What are the demographic, psychographic data of that ICP? What platform is this being used for? What context is there? What challenges have they faced? What goals do they have? What are the ideas behind it? What is the mission of the organization? Like, all of those pieces should be built out. And if you've got multiple different types of creative deliverables, you should have multiple different templates of the types of briefs that are being delivered to the client. So generally speaking, I like to have a project brief that's going to have that creative brief included in it. You have an account brief that's related to the overarching account, that it gets updated over time, that provides the context to the creative team and the creative director on that project to the context of that specific client, but having a template for each different type of brief, allowing for us to avoid the guesswork in the creation of the brief, because it is such a cornerstone component to what it is that we are doing. And if you're not launching the project well, you're creating for a lot of potential risk throughout that project. Another thing that I find incredibly important is having clarity across the project. So if you're not familiar with RACI, I would check it out just in Google. Very clear as to what it is, but RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And so throughout each different component, so as an example, we were just talking about briefs. Who is responsible for the creation of it? Who is accountable to the actual output of it? Who's consulted and who's informed? So as an example, we'll talk about a couple of people on a creative project. Let's say that we're working on a brand brief, a brand creative brief. So the creative director is often responsible and accountable for that brief. Consulted is going to be the account manager, maybe the project manager is definitely going to be the strategist, and informed can be project manager, or generally not the account manager, but it's going to be the designers, it's going to be the copywriters. Those are the people that are then informed of the stuff within the brief. Sometimes, depending on how senior of the design team, may be consulted as well. But understanding within each different component of a project, who is responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. And realizing throughout the project, you have different phases and different levels of involvement for different team members, from the strategists to the designers to copywriters to account managers to the account executives. And the reality is that with small teams, you have one individual that may be fulfilling multiple different components, but realize and understand fully that the greater clarity that the team has around what they are responsible or accountable for allows for the project to go more smoothly. If I believe as a team member, so let's say that I'm a designer on the project, and I believe that the account manager and the creative director are working on the creative brief, and I have no involvement and nothing to do there, and then a couple of weeks go by, and the creative director believes that I'm the one that was supposed to have done the first draft and get it to him or her, then the reality is that created a lot of bottleneck. And not sure if you're aware of this specific fact, but every single week that you go past the original timeline, it typically is eroding 6+% of your net profit. So, and if you're on tight margins already, it's an incredibly difficult place to be, and you do not want your projects going over timeline. It is incredibly vital that you have clarity as to what's going on. Communication is the core of most problems that are created in agencies. So having clarity and alignment into who's responsible for what is absolutely paramount. Now let's talk about the technology stack and tools for that infrastructure. Where is project management? Where is our center of truth within all the details? So I know that project management is not a sexy thing to be setting up. Whether it's Asana, ClickUp, Notion, whatever, I don't care what project management tool you're using, so long as it's one that's actually being used. And you can continue to refine and add on and build out and make it more robust over time. But you do need to have clarity as to what are the different steps that are going on. So as we were talking about that delivery pipeline from SOW signature, you're creating the internal kickoff call, the briefs, the client kickoff call, all those different things are tasks within your project management that ideally has an attached SOP to it, has an attached template to the details that are needing to be created that allow for each person to have the accountability or responsibility for completing that thing, and then who's reviewing if there's a quality control component to it. Then where are the assets all living? So how is your Google Drive or SharePoint or whatever cloud service you're using have all the documents and details there. And one little piece that's particularly useful here is what and how are we collecting communication and feedback from design reviews internally, as well as design reviews with clients. So are we using a frame.io? What kind of system are we using that allows for us? Is it directly in Figma that clients are putting comments? Like exactly how are we going about collecting, aggregating, and getting feedback from clients, and when does it actually get shut off so that we're not accepting any more feedback at this point? And then here's a little bit of a thorn in my side, frankly, is the communication channel. So are we communicating via project management? Are we a Slack communication house? And I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. Do we communicate primarily via email? So what communication channels are we using? What is the purpose of this communication channel? When is it used? When is it not? And when do we expect a response from within each communication channel? Slack, why I said communication is a bit of a thorn in my side, is specifically around Slack. It's actually one of the biggest distraction components across every single agency that I encounter using Slack heavily. They utilize it as a project management tool sometimes. They use it as the primary communication channel, and there's so much communication where it becomes overwhelming. So it becomes over communication that ends up creating for under communication. So you're over communicating so many things that there's too many things happening in Slack, and one individual one is being informed of things that they don't need to be informed with. They have nothing to do with it. And so now they're reading things that they have nothing to do with, but not getting enough time to get around to the things that they're supposed to. So under communicating on the things that they need to be involved with and over communicating on things that they don't. So be very clear as to which channel's used for what, why, when, how. That allows for us to be very clear. So like as an example, one little tidbit that we like to do ourselves when we're utilizing instant message oriented pieces is like, this is just an FYI, reply when ready. That allows for a prefix to the message that we are sending, providing for the utility or understanding of what's going on. And then how to go about quality control without micromanaging. So it's very important that we have review stages throughout the actual creative output and then internal quality control. So a couple of like little tidbits, and then you take how it is that you prefer to work, because each creative team is a little bit different. But here's a general rule that I like to use is that you want to concentrate about 60% of your total review time at the beginning of the project, because that's where you're starting to actually fully prepare and like get the trajectory of where the project is going. Creative brief being set up, then you have the initial reviews with the design crew. So you have the 10, 15, and 20 to 25% of that overarching budget where you're going to invest quite a lot of time in the initial phase of the project of the creative leads on the project. Creative director, creative lead, senior designer, whatever it is, or whoever it is that you have as the internal quality control management, or you as the owner, having a little bit more time allotted at the beginning of the project, and then again about 50%, and then you're going to invest a bit again towards the end to just get that final work to be pushed a bit. It's very important to be clear on how the information is communicated. Are you a Loom house? Are you a live meeting for design reviews? Do you do it as a group? One of the things that I really enjoy that I see some of the best performing agencies doing is actually bringing in at different stages. I've seen them do typically around 30% of the project, and again about 60% of the project, where they are requiring someone else not on the work, another designer on the team, to review the work as well, to be sure that we are getting feedback of someone else that isn't as deeply into the project, to just push it a little bit, that doesn't create for the need for the design leadership. But also one of the things that's incredibly useful is it's also useful for the person that is giving that feedback, that critique, because they are now in another project that they wouldn't have had their fingers in, and allows for them to learn from the learning lessons, the things that are going on within that project, where it's ultimately going. Making sure that we're meeting our own agency standards, the quality of what's required for the client, and making sure that we are producing incredible work. And then thinking about how do we go about creating for more capacity. My viewpoint is every moment that we are taking away from a strategist being a strategist, or from a designer doing design work and doing the thing that they enjoy doing, is actually a bad investment of our time and resources. So how do we think about what components can be templatized within our project? So like as an example, let's say that within a design file, Like, we are not going to want to create templated design necessarily unless you're looking at template websites, that sort of thing. I'm not kiboshing that. That's an absolutely useful model if that's the model that you're going with. But if you're more bespoke, one of the things that you can be looking at doing is your Figma file setup. You have a template of the way that you do your folder structure. So that allows for us to have the layering correctly and the folders the way that we want to have them so that they're organized the same way across all projects, or client kickoff calls, client meeting agendas, the way that we have our internal reviews, the way that we set up our briefs. Like, those things are very easily templatizable, a slight adjustment to the variation, allowing for us to have a meaningful time savings while instilling the amount of information that we need. The larger that you get, the more communication is going to be important. And if you have a great foundation at your early stages of an agency, you're going to allow yourself to grow a lot easier. If you're needing to stop and course correct, it just makes things harder. And the final thing is just thinking through all the different pieces and how you want to get everything fully going, and how this gets you to the place where, how do you have infrastructure that allows for you to be able to keep things stable, sustainable. So the SOP layer, the process follow through of how we're thinking about our delivery pipeline, but keeping the stability that keeps things predictable within execution. As we all know, that client feedback, if we are not having a system, templates by which we follow up with clients of, hey, we are expecting feedback on Thursday end of day, just following up with you, reminding you on Wednesday that that's happening, Thursday end of day, that, hey, just a quick reminder that we're expecting feedback, I don't see anything in the file yet. And then if they don't do it, Friday morning, hey, follow up, really need to get the information, or having a meeting that's already pre-booked on your calendar for Friday morning to review the comments, go through the things, and make sure that things are happening and moving throughout the project so that we are not getting client delays. It is vital that we have all of these things layered, thought about. So now that you, the owner, is able to have a management blueprint for a project and for your agency, the more that your projects are working streamlined throughout the actual full infrastructure, the way that you're thinking about it allows for things to be a lot better. So now that you understand the delivery infrastructure behind a high-performing creative agency, there's one more piece that you need to make it actually all work day to day. Your team needs clear, simple instructions that they can follow without needing to come back to you. Even the best infrastructure will fail if the people inside it are guessing, asking the same questions over and over and over again, or executing tasks differently every single time. So if you've already watched the SOP video, this ties everything together. And if you haven't watched it yet, now's the perfect time to give you the full picture of how these systems can work together.